Hello, this is Dylan Moore with Irida TV coming to you today. It is February 7th, 2024. I always want to focus on solutions on this show. It's really easy, particularly if you take a 5-second stroll through the internet to see the chaos of the world that's going on right now. And I know there's a lot of shows out there that are purportedly, true shows, and I'm not saying that they aren't, but they like to focus on, here's why things are bad. Here's the description of the chaos. Things are really bad. Things are really bad. Did you know that things are really bad? Here, let me describe in detail why the things are really bad. And when you look at it this way and you come to the conclusion that, okay, we got a bunch of overarching monolithic evil overlord entities trying to take over the world more and more, it's very easy for us to throw up our hands in despair and go, well, I guess we should just let Team Evil win, because how are we going to stand in the way of overarching monolithic entity? Now, if you've listened to the show at all, and particularly if you've gone through our series on the evolution of civilizations, you'll know that we've got a different viewpoint on that. And that when it comes to overarching monolithic entities, there's a huge weakness that they all have. And that huge weakness is the fact that when a entity that's created to have a certain goal, to have a certain purpose, eventually acquires a vested interest that's more concerned with feeding itself than it is in achieving whatever the purpose is. In order for it to continue achieving any level of that purpose, it requires greater and greater and greater and greater and greater resources from that organization in order to do so. And if you have a challenging new organization that tries to supplant the old organization with the vested interests, they're able to accomplish much, much more with a tiny fraction of those resources. So the fact that the entity is overarching and monolithic is in itself the weakness. So I always want to say, don't throw up your hands in despair. We need to understand what's going on, but we also have to provide solutions. So we're going to be talking about overarching monolithic entities today, and it's going to be zoomed in on our favorite form of overarching monolithic entity, which is teachers' unions, right? Aren't you already excited to listen about teachers unions? So I've got Brent Urbanik. Did I say that right? Urbanik? Urbanik. On with us today, and you're probably wondering, who is this guy? Well, Brent Urbanik is taking the theory that I'm talking about here and putting it into actual practice. Like I said, we want to talk about solutions and not just talk about them, do them, right? Brent is in Miami-Dade County in Florida, and is in the process of creating a new teachers union to replace the current teachers union of Miami-Dade County. So first and foremost, Brent, thanks for taking the time to come on and discuss such a important topic.
Thanks for having me, Dylan. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be able to air out some of these issues so people can be really well informed on how this works and the challenges, but also to inform people that it is doable. It's doable.
It's doable, and I mean, we're going to get into what exactly you're doing. And I mean, at this point, like if someone just started the conversation, they could say, "Well, I don't even know if I like what this guy's doing yet. Like, who is this guy?" Right? But we'll get there. And if it is something that somebody thinks they like, here's your example: make a carbon copy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, absolutely.
But before we get into that, can you give us a little history of your background? I mean, from what I understand, you've been in public education your whole life, right?
Well, in the sense that I went to public schools, yeah. My mother was a public school teacher. When I didn't initially study teaching in college, I actually worked as a group counselor in what's called the Department of Juvenile Justice here in Florida, where I essentially did group counseling with male juvenile delinquents. That was my first career, and I had transitioned after about 6 years doing that. I transitioned into teaching, and I've been here ever since. 22 years now. So it's been the greater portion of my professional career, obviously.
That's great. And before we get into exactly what you're doing, I'd like to set kind of like a foundation or a framework to help us understand it. And I think the first question that we really have to address, what's the purpose of a union?
Purpose of the union is to be able to collectively bargain for its members to get the best benefits wages and working conditions from whatever business or government entity that they're working under. It 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 ensures that um, pay is going to be, largely equal amongst its members. It prevents, the management from, picking favorites and things like that. But more importantly, it safeguards the worker from ever having like management essentially target them and things like that because it gives them certain rights that the union representation can come in and talk to management and say, hey, you're violating different contract codes or even, federal labor laws and things like that. So it's almost like it's a balance of power. It's a way that the worker, instead of being, isolated and alone, finds strength through unity with all the other workers to be able to effectively push back on the entity that it works for. And so that's the basic premise of it. And the whole idea is to just ensure that these either bureaucratic or business entities cannot exploit the worker. And by having a union, a group of workers that are together, essentially, they're able to essentially take a stand collectively against those bureaucracies or those businesses because there's strength in numbers. And so that's the principle of it.
Can you give a few examples of how a business might exploit its workers?
Well, sure. We can go with the larger scale, wide view in the sense that you're making your workers work extended hours, little breaks, low pay to maximize profits. Okay, so that's the obvious one. That's the one that spurred the labor movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But then there's also the smaller, nuanced ones where an individual worker, may be getting targeted by an individual manager because of personal reasons and things like that. And so that's the more focused, narrow view of it as well. It's for the individual as well as collectively for the workers and their conditions, because it can go both ways. And so those are some of the ways that, or some of the reasons why you really need a union, because those things happen all the time, and the union can safeguard against that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're familiar with, you mentioned it could go both ways because there's an argument from both sides here, which is,
yes,
hey, I'm the business owner and this person agreed to this and they didn't do it. Why can't I have a situation where I let them go, for example, because we're not in agreement anymore? And, it's a free country. You can work anywhere. I can hire whoever I want. So why can't I do that? There's an argument to be had there. However, I'm not putting that there to challenge you. And I'm also saying this at the risk of derailing the conversation a little bit. I think it's worth pointing out because I am a business owner and I don't want to be like steamrolled, right?
Of course.
But what's important to recognize and I'm saying this to viewer, what's important to recognize in the history of labor, for most of human history, on almost the entirety of the globe, manual labor was seen with disgust and disdain, and it's what you had the slaves do. And for most of human history, labor never had the seat at the decision-making table, ever. And it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution when the working conditions really got bad, and at the same time, people became literate in these ideas of like, wait a minute, freedom is a good thing, and we're all equal, and hey, if we're all equal, why is this, those two finally got to mix together, and labor was actually able to get itself a seat at the table. And I want to emphasize that point because it's easy for one side to say, hey, the business just exploits the worker, and on the other side it goes, hey, wait a minute, no, the business provides a service, and the union's preventing me from achieving the service that I'm trying to provide. You can't just like jump in one camp or the other and just point fingers. There's a meeting point in the middle. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and that's like the saying. There's the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. The question is where is that where? Where is that where?
Yeah, and we were, before I hit the record button, we were actually talking. Apparently, both Brent and I are descendants from people who created states. Right? I'm going to said it from one of the Washington State framers, and you said New Jersey and New York.
And yeah, Manhattan specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Manhattan. Yeah.
So, when I was reading about the creation of Washington State, before Washington State was turned into a state, there were so few people here that the companies that moved in were essentially de facto governments because they were the only power in town. And there was actually a couple instances of companies hiring private armies to quell strikes. And when the Washington State framers, remember this is 100 years after the United States is created, right? We're actually very, very concerned not just with government power, but with corporate power. And that was actually incorporated into the Constitution of Washington State. And I think that's an interesting point as we're having this discussion here, is that it's not just the government that can trample on your rights. Other entities can too.
That's right.
Right? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that at least the pure idea of a union is to have a defense against the corporate side of trampling on your rights.
That's right.
Would you agree
Absolutely.
with that? Yeah.
That's right. It's a counter to the power. And that's the foundation of this very country. It's to limit power to maximize freedom and productivity in some way. And so, that historically speaking, government always sided with business under that guise, but realize it's a two-way street. That, there's a point where you're reducing productivity. A point that I often make when I teach the labor movement is that, so much of the explosion of our economy and all the inventions that happened, it happened because people had time. And that time was granted by the labor movement, giving you the weekend, you see, by the labor movement trying to limit work days to 8 hours.
Or even 10.
And
I mean, that was the first one was getting 10 hours instead of whatever they had before.
12.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 12. Yeah. And so little things like that where the pushback happens against, that concept of, the business is the thing that's the economic driver and all that. By the labor movement doing what it did, it allowed for whole new sectors of the economy develop. And the fact that people were getting paid more, they were able to spend that money, and it really just it changed the modern world to what it is.
Absolutely. Now let's address this because this is where I want to go. Is when does a union start hurting? I guess first the business, but even more importantly, the people that they're supposed to represent.
Well, there's a lot of ways that can happen. Because obviously union leadership has direct contact with management. There's always the possibility that management can buy off union leadership. That can happen. Okay. And in a lot of cases, I think that's, where unions start to go wrong. The other side of it is when unions don't realize that, what they may gain now, they will lose later. So
what
like
do you mean by that?
Well, in the sense that like, okay, you want to have your workers paid a really high salary, but eventually it leads to the bankruptcy of the company later on down the road. And but the union leader that will have delivered such a high reward financially for its members, they end up retiring, and they don't see how that plays itself out over the course of maybe a couple of decades. And then that becomes problematic as well. They're playing the short game, and the company just wants to survive. So they're like, okay, well, we can afford this now, and we'll kind of figure it out later, but then they don't. And then the whole thing falls apart. I don't know if you remember a few years back, and I'm not clear in my memory about it, but the reason why Twinkies went extinct apparently is the union. Yeah, they did, but then they were resurrected under another company.
I haven't eaten a Twinkie since I was like 12 years old, but continue.
Thank you. Neither have I. I'm a pretty healthy eater, but I believe it was the Twinkies that they ended up having to close up shop because they they had extended the benefits to the workers so great that it just was no longer viable for them to keep producing them.
Hmm.
Um, but again, somebody would have to fact check me on that because I'm just this is the back of my mind. But that type of pattern has happened, and that's where it does become dangerous, where the union leaders are not thinking, with enough, well, long view into the future of the organization to see,
Right.
is it sustainable for the company? And so this is the reason why they have to be able to go back and find reasonable agreements.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, if they kill the company, then the workers got nothing,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
There's no one to
Yeah,
work for.
that's
Um,
right.
Getting more specific, so I asked, what's the purpose of a union? What's the purpose of a teachers union?
So teachers unions are important because all the same management issues that you could have in a regular business, you have, especially in the large bureaucracy of school systems. Um, you know, Everyone's people. People get, pick their favorites and they come down on people they don't like and all that. And being able to, have a union that essentially will defend you in those situations and be able to call out management for its favoritism and things like that, that's important. Now, when it comes to the collective bargaining for wages or benefits, um, it's just too much for a bureaucracy like a school system to sit there and individually negotiate salaries for each person.
Mm-hmm.
Could, I mean, businesses do it, but the problem with that model, and this is something that a lot of Republicans in our states were pushing for a long time, the idea that teachers can be, rewarded for what they produce based on test scores and things like that. It's completely unattainable. There are too many confounding variables that affect a child's performance in schools to be able to reward one teacher heavily for performance and then not reward another for the lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would be like rewarding a dentist for the amount of kids that come in without cavities. Well, it depends on where is the dentist working,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who are their customers? They don't necessarily choose their customers, right? I mean, you're in an area, maybe you're in an area where everyone's got a sweet tooth. And because of that, everyone's coming in with cavities, right? Do you suddenly, say that dentist is a bad dentist? And because we can't quantify all the nuances of these variables that really do affect a child's performance, you need a group to essentially say, all right, this is the value of what we do. And by collectively bargaining that value and trying to find a price to attach to it, it makes it easier not only for the workers themselves that they're not sitting there negotiating individually, but also makes it easier for the bureaucracy that they work under.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that would be the other side of it.
Should the primary benefactor of a teachers union be the teachers or the students?
I think that the answer to that is it should be both. But I think that the way that you help the students the most is you are able to attract the best and the brightest and most capable people into the field. Without capable people, which it's a tall order to be capable, especially in the midst of the mental health crisis kids are having, and all the other nuances of things like poverty and family problems. To find really capable people that can balance all these things, it's hard. But if you do find those capable people, the child benefits. But if you're paying people really low salaries and they're just kind of like whatever about it, that hurts the child as well. In fact, it hurts the child significantly. A lot of people can think about a teacher that they had in their lives that really made a difference, that was that little spark or that little extra push that they needed, that attaboy. And that goes so far for so many kids, especially, kids from broken homes, which there are many. And that kind of stuff is the reason why by treating teachers well, you end up benefiting child as well. And that's what we're ultimately looking to do in the long run. We're trying to raise children and give them the skills they need to have happy, healthy, and productive lives.
Hmm.
And so that's why it's both. It's not, it's not a choice one or the other. I think it's a bad narrative to sit there and constantly push the idea that you do it for the children, because we are doing it for the children. But you have to understand that the teachers are the essentially the vehicle that does it for the children. And it's like, if you're not taking care of your car and it breaks down, you're not going anywhere. And that's kind of the crisis that we're seeing across the nation, the teacher shortage, things like that, because it's just not a viable career for a lot of people, and a lot of people don't want to be bothered with the amount of extra work they have to do after school. People often say, "Oh, you get the summers off." Yeah, but most teachers, they're pushing 60-hour weeks. You don't complain that your accountant has a good amount of time off after tax season. You see, because the accountant works really hard during tax season. It's a similar thing, but a lot of people are saying, when a summer off, it's not worth it. Especially the fact that teacher salaries are so low across the country that most teachers have side gigs, and then the summertime comes along and they do that full time.
So I do want to split a hair on this one. So
Sure.
when it comes to looking at the teachers versus students, I'm not disagreeing with you that obviously in order to serve a customer, and to use that terminology here, the student's the customer, right?
Sure.
In order
Sure.
to serve a customer, you get. I mean, if I go to a restaurant and they don't have high quality food, or if they're using low quality food, I'm not going to get served very well. And if the owner's like going, well, I don't want to spend all the money in this high quality food, well, at some point the whole thing's going to fall apart because they're going to go eat somewhere else, right?
Yes.
So I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but I think it's worth analyzing this to say, okay, the most important thing is the student, which is the customer. Now we can orient toward, okay, how do we achieve that? Which is we got to attract good teachers, and how do we do that? But do you ever have the worry, and this is the worry that I have, that if the student isn't on top, if it's sharing it with the teacher, the waters can get muddied, because if they're on the same level, and I say, okay, here's my bargaining, here's what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
Is the focus on the teachers or is the focus on the students? Now, it's difficult, like you said, because we need to have some focus on the teachers in order to serve the students. But is there not the opportunity to use that language to say, look, we need more because the teachers help the students, the teachers help the students, the teachers help the students? Well, okay, sure, but how are we measuring that the students are being helped with this?
Yeah. So, it reminds me of a quote from Joseph Goebbels, the famous Nazi propagandist. I believe it was him that said that people will endure almost anything in the name of children.
Right.
And so you can end up using children as your like, there's a reason why we call it a poster child, right? So like, use somebody as a poster child to try to elicit support. And yeah, that's a dangerous thing, that a dangerous line that you can cross. So how do we clear up that water? Well, the problem is that if you were to clear up that water in the manner that I'm saying, you wouldn't necessarily see the benefits, for maybe a decade. You see, and that long game view is very difficult, especially for legislation to look at and see. But you can look backwards and look over the decades to see what has happened. And by looking back and seeing that, well, okay, this is the way we've been doing it, and now look at where we're at. Students are not as well equipped for the world as they were when I was young. And the quality of life for teachers based on their pay has diminished quite radically. And obviously we have a chronic teacher shortage, which has happened in the past. It's not the first time. It was like that in the 80s. But you look backwards to see, all right, is this system working as it is? Because historically speaking, teachers always really didn't get paid very well. See? And so are we going to continue that trend and just try to put more of the strain on the teacher to prove their worth? Or do we sit there and take out a whole new clean slate and say, all right, we need a different model? Because if you look at the nations that are very successful with their students, the Scandinavian countries, Japan, their teachers are paid very well. They're very well respected, and therefore they end up having the results in the students that makes America envious. And so you have other models to look at to be able to glean the information that you need. But then it's at the end of the day, you have to have people, legislators, voters, willing to say, okay, there is that model. Let's give it a shot, and then be willing to stick it out.
I'm glad you brought up Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife's Japanese.
Okay.
Like not just like ethnically Japanese, but like she grew up in Japan. She until she was 18. She left when she was 18, and she's talked about her experience in the Japanese school system. And her brother actually came here at one point. He stayed. And he took an English class, and I remember he's taking this English as a second language class, and he came to me for help. And there were all these questions of, like, what's your favorite thing to do? What basic, easy stuff. What's your favorite colors? That sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And he had no conception of how to answer these questions. And my wife told me, in Japan, nobody asks your opinion in school. They say, this is the answer. Write the answer. Yeah. And I bring that up because I think this is another interesting conversation of how do we define success of a student? If we look at test scores and we turn around and we look at Japan, look at how these people are able to focus and create these test scores. Well, you can create completely unimaginative, totally dependent human beings that aren't capable of operating without a superior telling them what to do. Right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not trying to criticize you saying, okay, let's look at Japan or let's look at Scandinavia and see what we can glean from that. What my question is, so we go back to we need well-paid teachers. We need good teachers to create good students. 100%. How we achieve that is clunky because, I mean, as you pointed out, it takes 10 years to find out if we had a good idea or not. But even taking another step back further, what's a teacher's role in understanding what success means for a student?
So that's where knowing your students individually is very important. You end up knowing your kid, meaning your student. You know your student, and you end up being the best gauge of that. And so that's one of the reasons why trying to do large scale mass testing to try to glean that type of success is a little bit more difficult. It's not that it's impossible because, you look at the IQ test, for example, which is controversial, but at the end of the day, if it's the most tested, retested, and studied psychometric measurement that we have. And, you do get an accurate look at how well someone will be able to function, within Western civilization. Not the nuance of the score, but more like the quartiles. If someone's in the upper quartile, there's a good chance they're going to be all right. And so, measuring success in a student via just testing, it's a very narrow view of overall success. Because, like, one thing that we know, or I shouldn't say we know, but one of the things that researchers suggest is we cannot tease out what really is driving success in people. Is it really IQ or is it conscientiousness? You see? And so there are a lot of other measurements in a kid's performance in a class that you can essentially glean success from. A kid who tries really hard, they're flunking everything, they try really hard, and you see that they did, and they pull a C, right? That's a huge success. Now people make, oh, it's only a C. Well, no, C is moderate. I joke a lot with all my students because to them, like, a C is an F, right?
Was for me.
But yeah. And it's, a grade inflation is a whole nother thing we can get into. It's a big problem across the country. Even in colleges, it's a problem. But you can see the kid tried really hard and right there, like, okay, that kid going from a an F to a C. That's a success, you see. And so I understand the Japanese model. I actually did an exchange program there.
Hmm.
And I got to sit in on Japanese classes. And you're right, you don't ever have anybody ask opinions and things like that. I mean, granted, they're a collectivist culture as well, and obviously it works for their culture. We're, an individualistic culture. It's way too restrictive for us. But needless to say, teachers are usually the best people to see that, whether or not progress is actually happening. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have other teachers be able to actually see the measured success of other teachers' kids. I'm not saying that teachers should like rate their own ability, because there is an objective measurement that can happen. But
Hmm.
one of the problems a lot of us teachers have is that the social science isn't clear enough on how to really do that. There's a nuance that you as an individual teacher can see in your own students. But to say that we have that the nuance of that essentially intuition that a teacher has quantified and calculated within a paper and pencil or computer based test to make it so that we can quantify a teacher's ability, just not there yet. And it
Hmm.
would be great if we get there. It really would be. But we're not there yet. The science isn't there yet.
Well, and then, I don't know if you've ever considered this. This is something I realized at some point. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really good at taking tests,
Oh,
regardless
yeah.
regardless of the
Mm-hmm.
topic. With one exception, I'm a chemistry major. I remember taking physical chemistry. Which is quantum mechanics, they call it in physics, right?
Yeah.
I remember having a test that was a blank sheet of paper with one little question on the top, and I ran out of room doing the multivariable
Equation.
calculus
Yeah.
to try, right. That one wasn't easy, right? But almost all the other tests that I took were always easy for me, and at some point in my life I realized I was good at taking tests. I've never had test anxiety, except maybe for physical chemistry. I've never had test
Okay.
anxiety, and it's I don't know why. It's just very, very natural for me to take a test. Whereas I remember, particularly in high school, where I was in the advanced classes, and I had people very smart in my classes as well. They'd just stress about the test and study and study and study, and I mean, we both get an A, but I have a 98 and they'd have a 96, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's one friend in particular. I remember getting frustrated at me. He's like, why do we're both getting A's, so fundamentally, who cares? But at some level, why did you get a point higher than me? Like, we both understand this very well. And I started to realize that test taking itself is a skill.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And if someone's bad at taking tests, I mean, so what? Like, if you throw them out in the world, all right.
Yeah.
Hey, plumber, I don't think you're a very good plumber because you get anxiety when taking. I mean, that doesn't even make sense,
No,
right?
it doesn't. Mm-hmm.
So, to the point that you're making here, you're talking about teachers' intuition, and you're talking about, okay, going from an F to a C, whereas me, I'd look at a C and consider it an F, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at some level, it's kind of like, who cares? What are they able to accomplish? And what, as the teacher, have you been able to see what this person's accomplishing, kind of filtering out that test taking in itself is a skill?
Yeah, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely true. And knowing that test taking is a skill, and when you're a good teacher, like I spend the first week and a half of my classes not only teaching my students how to study, like the actual science of how to do it, but I also teach them test taking skills.
Right. Multiple choice.
And what
There's always two
yeah,
stupid answers on the multiple choice question. Right.
yeah, of course, and so test taking itself can be a skill like anything else that can be taught. But yeah, there is a danger, and oftentimes, we find that the person that gets the highest grade isn't necessarily the best one at it.
Right.
But there has to be some type of objective measurement that happens somewhere. And I'm not saying that those objective measurements, are nothing. They are
Hmm.
something. But to then base a teacher's livelihood on that is just too much of an ask at this point where the science is. The science just isn't there.
And I think I'm agreeing with you based on what I just said, where you can have this guy that went from an F to a C, turns out to be a millionaire, and the guy who's straight A just,
Yes.
He's
absolutely.
some lame-o manager at the company down the street, right? I mean,
that's right.
That's right. It's hard to quantify.
It's very hard. But you look into in the past, the way the education was conducted, where we didn't have any of these standards, right? And my parents' generation, they invented all kinds of tech and all that kind of stuff. You see, and their teachers didn't have these kinds of restrictions on them. Mm-hmm. What was going on? Of course, it's not just the teachers in that sense. Of course, it's culture at large. What was interesting, back in those days, a lot of people were interested in electronics and engineering, and kids these days, they're not as into it, that kind of stuff. They're more concerned about being like an influencer or something. You see? And so there's other cultural pressures.
Sorry to interrupt you. I got to say, I think it's because the computers work now. When I was a kid, the computers didn't work. you had to fix them all the time. Now they just work. So sorry to interrupt you. I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, well, but those are other things that factor into these things. And that's, again, another reason why that being in teaching is hard, because a lot of cultures' other failures, teachers often get the blame for. Mm-hmm. You see? Because it's not our fault if a kid is failing to perform when, their home life is a disaster, or
Absolutely.
their parents are never around, because their parents have to work multiple jobs just to pay the rent and put food on the table, right? And that kid may need that parent to be there and be like, hey, off your phone. You're studying right now, but the parent's not there. And so the child's kind of a feral child on their own. And, these machines this is made to be addicting.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is the kid doesn't perform as well, but then now the teacher gets the blame for that. You see, it's just, there's too many what we call confounding variables that go into that. And teachers unjustly get the blame for much of that. But if you want teachers to be able to fix as much of that as they possibly can, you're going to have to attract some serious miracle workers. And they're out there, and there's a lot of them. But how many of those types of people that have those abilities are going to choose this career?
Absolutely.
With all of the social problems that we have to deal with, and the extremely low pay, and obviously you get picked on by the bureaucrats and things like that. That's not going to work. You're not going to attract the best and the brightest. It's just not going to happen. And so that's, one of to bring this full circle. It's one of the reasons why, it's important for teachers unions to be able to advocate for the best wages, benefits, and working conditions of their employees, because it does end up helping the kids. You see, it does. It translates into that. Mm-hmm. You're just not going to see it the next school year. You see, it's going to be something that's going to build over time.
So let's take it from the theory down to the practical, because I liked having that conversation, because now that we're stepping into what exactly are you doing in Miami-Dade, Florida?
Right.
We've got the ideas, and we've got your mindset going into that now. So tell me about what you're doing in Florida and who you're challenging.
Okay. What we're doing here is we're challenging the third largest teachers union in the Southeast, or I guess they're the first largest. If I think about our bargaining unit as a whole, they're probably the largest Southeastern teachers union. The reason why is because they have a long history of corruption, and they're not producing any real significant salaries, benefits, and wages increase that is worthy of note. And the reason why that is because we believe that the union leadership has essentially been hijacked by the very district that it's supposed to be bargaining against. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of on the same team. And our union, in a lot of ways, has become like a pacification force for the teachers, to tell them, no, this is really the best they can do. And, it's the legislator. When a lot
lower your expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's a lot of our the people that I'm doing this with have done a lot of really good investigative journalism, essentially doing the things that you'd think our own papers would be doing to show like, okay,
I don't
here's
expect that
something.
anymore.
Yeah, I know it's pretty bad.
But
It's
your
pretty
point's made.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're showing that that's not the case at all. That there's absolutely money out there, and that the union stands by idly as these people hide it. So, like, wait, what's happening here? How can a union sit there and it's like I heard a quote the other day and somebody attributed it to Carl Jung, but they weren't sure, so I'm not sure. And I'm not even sure I'm going to say the quote right, but if you can't understand why somebody's doing what they're doing, then what you have to do is like work backwards and try to see what would motivate them to do what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's only two potential options when we look at our current union. They're either completely inept in every way, shape, or form as labor leaders, or they're getting paid to not do something. They're receiving some kind of benefit to be this bad. So it's one of the two because it's
and
bad.
which one's better?
Yeah, I mean,
who cares, right? They're both bad.
Here's another quote that it was I think it was some guy, a Secretary of Agriculture from like the 1950s, and I can't remember his name, but he was quoting or he was talking about how inept the government was in dealing with communist infiltration in throughout our culture by the Russians, and he said that if the government was merely stupid, they would occasionally make a mistake in our favor. And that applies here. That if you're really stupid, but consistency is not the hallmark of stupidity.
Yeah.
It's randomness. So they would occasionally make a mistake in our favor. That just hasn't happened. And so what we're doing here actually started probably like 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. We had a union leader who was the one who made our union. His name was Pat Tornillo. And he ended up going to jail for embezzling millions of dollars, and all of his cronies didn't go. They remained in power, and we're kind of still dealing with his spirit in the system. And there's been multiple people, some of them, working with us now, that tried to change the union from within. We wanted them to join us 20 years ago, and they wouldn't. They said, no, you got to change it from within. Trying to do something new from the outside is not the right approach. And they tried and failed multiple times. And now here we are. So now we've kind of joined together. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to essentially replace them. What happened was in Florida, there was a bill that was passed that, in many ways was like people see it as anti-union, but it was actually more like a union competition bill. And it made it easier.
It's anti-my union. Yes, sorry.
Pretty much.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I can't help it sometimes. Yeah.
Pretty much, because what it said is that a union has to have at least 60% of the bargaining unit. We're a right to work state, so you don't have to belong to the union. You have to have at least 60% of the working force, part of the union, or they are essentially decertified and they have to recertify with 30% support every single year. And so what the law also said is that an intervening union, if they want to try to get on the ballot for when the current union has to get their 30% and then have the workers vote on it, that an intervening union only needs 10%. When I was trying to do this with a couple other teachers 20 plus years ago, we needed to get the 50% plus one.
That's a big difference.
And it's a huge
50
difference.
To 10? That's huge.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. And there was all kinds of other complicated things too. 20 years ago.
I want to understand this process a little better. So when we're saying 50% or 60% or 30 or 10 or whatever, we're talking about membership in the union, or like there's a vote that goes up.
It's membership in the union north of 60% prevents there from triggering a vote. If they're south of it, if they're south of it, then what has to happen is they have to essentially like try to become a union again. This time they don't have to get to 50%. They only have to get to 30%.
Okay.
You see, like normally, if a union forms, they have to get 50% of the workforce to say they want a union, and then they hold an election. All right. So now the law is they have to be above 60%. If not, they lose their certification in a union and they have to reorganize, but they only have to get to 30%. And then the bargaining unit votes to keep them.
And then if you're a new organization like you only have to get to 10?
Only to 10%.
Now,
yes.
What happens if they get to 30 and you get to 10?
Well, then we're both on the ballot.
Oh, this isn't who gets to win. This is who gets on the ballot. And then there's a vote. And then what do you need to vote? You have to be a teacher for a certain amount of time.
You have to be a member of the bargaining unit, which is teachers and like support staff, essentially security guards, things like that. You have to be a member of the bargaining unit.
Is there any weight to a vote? Like teachers are worth twice as much as the security? Okay, everybody's just one.
Nope.
All right,
everyone's one.
I just wanted to know the details.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah.
So they fallen below 60%. The current
they fell below 60%. They were trying. They actually kicked out all the substitute teachers to try to make it easier for them to get to the 60%. Yeah, they kicked them out. And they still failed. They got to like 58%. And so they got to 50%. They were technically decertified. They were threatening everybody that if this were to happen, that we would immediately lose the contract.
World's going to end.
Didn't happen. Yeah, it's a whole world was going to end.
If you don't feed us, the world's going to end. Right.
Yes, yeah. And it didn't happen. We still have our contract. And they had to now go around and collect 30% of the bargaining unit signatures to essentially trigger another vote. That vote, is yet to be decided when it'll happen. The state decides when that'll happen. And in the meantime, we're actually trying to get 30% because if we only collect 10%,
it doesn't look that good, does it?
It doesn't look good. Yeah, okay, we got 10%, but still 30% of people sign their cards, and then 30 versus 10, they're probably going to win. Mm-hmm. And so we're really actively pursuing the 30% because it's the only way to really be viable. People can sign both cards.
Really? So I could vote for both?
No, you're not voting for both. You're signing a card to get either or on the ballot. It's about getting on the ballot. Yeah, but once the ballot's there, then you got to vote for one.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I used the terminology wrong. So I'm saying to vote. So you're coming to me with new union, old union's coming to me, and I can write my name on both, saying I want both of you on the ballot. I'm able to do that?
That's right.
Okay, that's it.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, you can do that for sure. Because you want to make sure that the choice is there. You can absolutely do that.
And then in terms of the timeline, you still don't know the timeline for when. Yeah. And you're still trying to figure out when who's going to be on the ballot is determined. Do I have that right?
Well, we know at this point that there will be an election that at least the current union will be on the ballot, and people will have the opportunity to choose the current union or no union. Mm-hmm. We're aiming to be able to submit 30%.
And do you have any idea how much more time you have to collect at minimum that 30%?
No, actually, this is a brand new law. The state, the Public Employee Relations Committee
We're still trying to hire the people that are going to tell you. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. It's been and that side of it has been very sloppy. Which is frustrating for both the current union,
the state does something sloppy. I don't believe you.
It's government sloppy, never, right? And so we don't have a time frame yet, and so we just keep on, trying to collect signatures, and it's a showing of interest card, is what it's called, a showing of interest card that we submit to the Public Employee Relations Committee. They already submitted theirs, and we submitted, and as long as we're north of 10%, we're on the ballot, but our goal is 30%. Just because, all right, great, we got 10%, that doesn't mean we're going to win. Mm-hmm. You see, we want to be able to match, so we have an opportunity to win.
So what will your union do that the current one doesn't? Tell me why should I vote for you, Brent?
Okay, so the main selling point is we're only going to be focusing on salaries, benefits, and working conditions. We are not going to get involved in like supporting political candidates. We're going to be a nonpartisan union. We believe that public service sector unions really should not be taking partisan stances because it's a wedge issue that divides the members themselves. The breakdown of teachers.
And I'm sorry, let me pause that. Or jump in here because I think that's a very, very important point. You're saying that the current union takes union members' money and then turns around to use that to support political candidates.
Yes, they do.
Right.
Yes. So, our own union president actually ran as partnering with Charlie Crist on the Democratic ticket to be governor, and they received a $500,000 donation.
So and you're saying that our union wants nothing to do with any of that because that we do not believe that is a proper role of a union. And if I bring back like the second paragraph I said at the beginning of this in the opening about how an organization will at some point acquire vested interests that are more interested in serving themselves over whatever the purported goal of the organization is. What a perfect example of that. Right? We're going to collect money and use it for political candidates. Oh, yeah. Oh, you need salaries and stuff, too? Yeah, I think that's on the agenda at the bottom somewhere. We might get around to that.
Yeah,
right?
They lose sight of that. Now, they're, to play, devil's advocate here, they see it as we're going to get candidates that are going to support, public education measures, and that's how it ends up benefiting you.
That's how I can give myself more money.
Yeah, so and the thing is that's foolish about that is like, okay, I understand that in principle, but we have years and years of that happening, and that's like there is no results on that. There's no results because what ends up happening is those politicians they get sidetracked with other things or they're just really not interested. I mean, right now, our president's wife is a teacher. Oh, where's the publicity? We're in a national teacher crisis in the sense of shortages. Like, where's the messaging on this? What are we trying to do about this? You see? And I'm sure the teachers union donated to the Biden campaign because that's what they would have done under the current system. So our union is going to be nonpartisan because A, it doesn't really benefit you. Okay. You're not really getting your money's worth on that. B, not everybody believes in the same political philosophies. And this ends up being a very divisive issue. That unions need numbers to be strong in many ways. All right. Not in all ways. A lot of times you just need good leadership. But in many ways, the more people that belong to the union, the more the bureaucracy or the business will take the union seriously. And, rough estimates are that most teachers are political independents that either lean left or right. And then when we look at the actual numbers, it's probably 60-40 liberal to conservative when it comes to teachers, which, people have an idea in their head that most teachers
are
liberal.
80-20 or 90-10.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's like 60-40. Of course, it depends on if you're in rural areas versus if you are in cities. Our city is pretty unique. Our city has become far more conservative simply because of the influx of migrants from nations that have been destroyed by socialism and stuff. Yeah,
Cuba.
Well, right now it's more recently Venezuelans. Right. And I've lived in Miami for like 26 years, and when I first moved to Miami, Venezuela was the second wealthiest nation in our hemisphere. And to see what's happened there has been like, wow. And so the people from those nations have come here, they're very distrustful of the political left's, leanings toward any type of socialized medicine and obviously public schools and things like that. They see as potential vehicles for indoctrination because that's what happens in those nations. But it's not nearly what they think. It's not an 80-20 thing. It's a 60-40 thing. And so by us being nonpartisan, we're going to bring all of us together. We should all focus on the things we agree on. What we agree on is that we need better pay, better working conditions, and better benefits. Why bring in wedge issues? Why support one candidate and alienate 40% of your bargaining unit? It's just not right.
Well, and
plus it's a public sector union. So it's even wrong to do for the taxpayer.
Right.
You see, because the taxpayer now is paying your salary and part of your salary may be going to candidates they don't necessarily support.
Right.
So this is where teachers unions start to become divisive issues for people.
Well, and I think that's a huge point with the public sector, because ultimately the taxpayer's paying for your salary, and then the union takes, okay, we get a piece of that salary to support the union, and they turn around and they support a political candidate like that. Well, how is that not the union being able to use tax money for political?
It is by proxy.
Yeah, political campaigns. So I wanted to pull that issue out because I think that's a very, very big issue, although I did derail you because you're in the midst of listing what your union is going to fix versus what the current union is doing. Yes,
so that's we'll call that one of them. Next one is, we know that there is money out there. We know it based on the fact that they don't do the right millage rates and things like that, and we're going to go after that money.
What do you mean? Tell me more what that means.
So essentially, like, we've just had a housing boom here, and every time a house is bought at a higher price, taxes are up, you see? And we're constantly told there really is no money. There really is no money. We don't believe it. I'm not the expert on this in our organization. The one I co-founded this with, he is the expert on it, so I won't go into great detail. But there's a lot of taxable millage that's not happening, that they don't want to raise the millage. They want to try to keep the taxes, right where they're at. But it's kind of the duty of the school board and the bureaucracy in the district to, suggest this is what the millage rate should go up to, because there's obviously inflation happening, right?
And what's a millage rate? We're not you're not like pronouncing mileage differently. You're talking about something else, right?
No. It's like the rate at which you can tax based on house value.
Okay.
It's something like that. And so, we know there's money out there. And we when we backtrack in time, one of the big things that happened to us that really was, I guess, painful, and like a serious betrayal, is that the Florida state legislature passed a law that said that teachers need to have some type of merit pay. And, we were all told by both our district and our union that, oh, well, our step increases, which is a system where after so many years of working, you get these pay raises. That system is no longer counts, and now the new system is just rewarding teachers based on performance. And
we knew how difficult that is to measure.
Exactly, but in the way the Florida state legislature wrote the law, it made a grandfather clause, meaning that the old system, the step system, doesn't necessarily have to go away. You just have to add to it a performance pay measure. And we were told, no, you can't have the step schedule anymore. And the union stood by idly and like, yep, can't have it. Oh, well, it's the legislator's fault, and they did away with it. And we've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not shy about, where I'm at in my salary, my base salaries, without supplements and things like that. I'm still in the 50s, and I'm 22 years in, and I live in one of the most expensive cities in the nation. Mm-hmm. And according to the old salary schedule, I probably would have been in the 70s right now, and realize when we retire, we go down to 60% of what our salary was for our top 3 years salary.
Sure.
So imagine me trying to live in this city, going down 60% from being in the 50s as my base salary.
Well, and in terms of finding the money, I think that there's also an important point to look at here, because there's two ways to find the money. From the way I'm going to present it is you tax more, right? Mm-hmm. Find the money to give it to the teachers more, and to spend less. How much does the current union take out of a teacher's paycheck?
Well, their union dues are close to about $1,000, half of which will go directly to the national and the state organizations.
A year or a month?
For the whole year, It's about $1,000.
Okay, I mean that's not like, that's annoying, but it's not like a death blow, right?
For some people it is. For some people it is. For a lot of the older teachers that made it up to those top step raises before they did away with them, they can handle that load a little bit more. One of our ideas, in cutting out the national and the state affiliates, because they are very political and partisan, we would be able to cut our union dues by at most half. I mean, we could be even more. And that saves teachers a tremendous amount of money, because a grand is a grand, and when you're on, a base salary that's only in the 50s, that's a big difference.
Absolutely.
It's a steep cost, because if you got like $1,000 mechanic bill, you'd be moaning and groaning, right? And so they charge that amount. Half of it goes to the state and the national affiliates that are supposed to be working on your behalf, but they rarely produce anything significant for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a teacher of 30 years, and you're paying $500 a year for 30 years and you're not getting much for it, would have been better for you just to invest your money at that point.
Right.
And so, by us staying nonpartisan and what we call local only, where we only stay local, we don't have any national state affiliations that we have to pay into. We believe that we're leaner and meaner.
Yeah.
And by
you don't have a
doing that,
conflict of interest that
we
could
don't have a
spring up from
conflict
any
of
of these
interest.
things. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. We don't have any conflicts of interest. And we're not sitting there thinking about how do we serve the politics that we're involved in. Instead, we're thinking, how do we serve our membership only? And that's going to unite all of us.
So the question that comes to me when you say that is, let's say you guys win, you become the new union.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to set up the union to prevent something like that from happening with your union in the future?
So just like in the founding of this country, it's all in your founding documents.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did was we put it into our constitution and bylaws that, the leadership, you can max serve 6 years, and that's it in any leadership position like treasury, secretary. You can only, serve in one of those capacities for like 2 terms. So like somebody who's a treasurer can serve a term as a treasurer and then like run as president and get reelected, but max 6 years. Right now, there are no term limits for our leadership, and they've been in power for years. Pat Tornillo, our founder, was in power from the 1970s until I guess it was the 1990s, early 2000s, when he was finally sent to jail. Like, that's tyranny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, we put it into our founding documents that there's term limits. We put it into our founding documents that we will remain nonpartisan. Okay,
no money to political campaigns.
No political. No,
and there's no way to change this part of the Constitution that says.
Well, yeah, there is. I mean, it would take a pretty hefty lift by the whole bargaining unit to do that, and they'll be their right to do that if they feel like it's not viable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, we're not sending money to political candidates. We can write a voter recommendation, like based on the different school board members we talk to. We think it would be best for you to vote for this person.
Mm-hmm.
We're not apolitical. They were originally thinking about pushing this idea of being apolitical onto us, meaning that other members of our organization, like they're saying, no, we should be apolitical. And I was like, can't be apolitical as a union.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
So we can endorse, but we can't send them any money.
Yes.
We can say,
not even endorse. No, not even endorse. Yeah, no, because it's like a voter recommendation guide. It's not even a full endorsement. You see, it's just try to stay out of that. The concept of nonpartisanship is that you're not choosing sides. The reason why it's not apolitical is because we do have concerns about politics. Because if anybody comes along saying they're going to, try to hurt our benefits, our wages, or reduce our working conditions, we're obviously got to fight that.
Right.
We gotta fight for our people here. And so that's why it's in the bylaws and the Constitution that we're a nonpartisan organization, and that's going to prevent us from getting sucked into any of these political traps that you fall into when you take partisan positions. You're really just working for the members. And that's the gist of it on that level. That's what we're going to be doing different. And the term limits is going to automatically prevent dynasties.
What other traps do you envision could be there that you're angling now to prevent in the future? Yeah,
so you can't know the unknown's unknown, right? But but the other traps is, you know, this is a very interesting city. This city recently had our mayor got in a little bit of trouble. There's a long history of like kleptocracy around here, and the thing that I always worry about is essentially the way the bribery works.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Billy Corbin, the director of that famous cocaine cowboy documentary that everyone talks about. It was, it made a big splash about how Miami used to work and all that. But there's a lot of that that's still kind of residual here. And he spoke at City Hall, and he said that we're like a predator city where we constantly prey upon the taxpayer for their money. Um, and there's from his original documentary, he's done two of them. He said that the cocaine trade back in the 80s, that there was somebody on there that said that caught people in Miami that everybody's got their price. And that's something that I do worry about. That even though we can ensure all this by bylaws and stuff, that people have their price, and that they can be bought.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, teachers are a very easy group to fall prey to that. Teachers in general are very agreeable people. Okay. And agreeable, you need to be agreeable when you're working with kids, because some of these kids will take you places,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you need to be agreeable and be able to look past that kind of stuff, not hold grudges. And so teachers by nature are that. But what a lot of the data shows us as well is that like sociopathic personalities are gravitate toward agreeable people because they're easy to take advantage of.
Correct. And they gravitate toward
And
powerful positions. Yes.
and they gravitate to powerful positions. And what a better position to be in, and then try to go into union leadership and tell everybody, this is the best we could do, while you're pocketing some type of side money. I mean,
Right.
it's perfect for that, because more than likely teachers that are both agreeable typically are a little bit more sheepish about things. Um, they're gonna they're gonna kind of be like, oh shucks. They're not gonna sit there and like really investigate and be like, hey, what's going on? They're not rough and tumble like that, because you can't be as a teacher. It's not a good trait to have, or you'd be torturing these kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so that personality traits makes it easy for that kind of predatory behavior to happen to them. And so I do worry about that. And I don't know how to solve that other than, you know, keep it in the bylaws that you can have no dynasties. Keep it in the bylaws to be nonpartisan. And then essentially hope the best and the brightest of us continue to run for these positions to be able to, you know, keep it the way we had intended.
Absolutely.
You see?
I do.
But yeah, that's my biggest worry. I mean, of course, aside from the unknowns unknown, you can't know that. You can't know those things that are behind the hill that's behind the hill,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But that's the one that I know of that I always worry about, because I understand that phenomenon. I see it. We see it in politics, and you see it. You see it sometimes even bureaucracies. You have the corporate psychopath type that takes advantage of the very agreeable worker, and that's a worry. It's a concern. But that is a part of the human condition that we have yet to learn about, that we have yet to really master. We could tell if somebody's a little off, mentally or something like that. Your brain can pick up the signals of, the fact that they may be disturbed in some way, but we have not evolved the ability to detect a sociopathic personality amongst us. And in fact, we actually get wooed by them. We get persuaded by them. We believe them. We trust them.
This is so funny that you're bringing this up. I'm going to say this is a side quip, but we could move on.
Uh-huh.
I believe I have developed a method of identifying that, and what you're describing is exactly the thing that I think is the weakness in any organization. Excuse me. That we worship narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. Like, you're a crazy narcissist. Please take this power. Oh yeah, please, 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 please. And we don't recognize what's going on. And until
the charisma,
as a species, we start to be able to recognize that sort of thing.
Life changes.
I mean, like you said, we got to work with what we got, because I mean that's a completely different conversation. And I interesting that you're bringing that up, because I'm partway through the process of putting together a presentation just literally about that subject. How do you identify these people? Yeah.
Please share it. Please share it.
Yeah.
Because I see that as the major wrench in the wheel of civilization. It's the major wrench in the wheel.
Have you ever read the Dune series by Frank Herbert?
No, but I've seen the movie. My wife's all into it.
You're talking about this conversation and you haven't read Dune? Forget the movie. That is like one of the central themes of Frank Herbert's work, is this idea that he says, that there's this old axiom, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Frank Herbert goes, no. Power attracts the corruptible. And I think that's a more accurate view, and I think that's exactly what you and I are talking about, is powerful people are going to be attracted to these positions of power. And this isn't so much a theme in his book, but it's like, well, what do you do about that? Right? No,
it's a problem. Yeah. It's absolutely a problem. Yeah, they are. They are attracted. I think from the studies I can remember, it's somewhere like in general population, you're looking at like 1% to 2% of people that would score like the sociopathic. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hare scale of sociopathy. Robert Hare, he's a Canadian psychologist. He's kind of like the world's expert on sociopathy. And he developed a scale. Most people in the general public, you'll score like a 2 or 3. Right?
What's the high end? Like,
well, that's the thing. You get to like, you get to like the 30s, and now you're looking at like, the Charlie Manson types.
Got it.
But here's the thing. Someone who's in the teens is not Charlie Manson, but they look a hell of a lot different than you and I who are in the 2s and 3s.
Right. They might not go on murder sprees, but they might become a union leader that'll steal all your money and
Precisely. And it's that group that they believe is overrepresented in positions of power in general, whether it be corporate or bureaucratic and governmental, that they're disproportionately represented there. They think upwards to like 20%. And that's really problematic for any organization. If you look at, what happened in the financial crash of 2008, there was a lot of that type of personality that, like they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were selling, bad loans to people and stuff like that.
We're going to short our own product. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually a famous book written about it. I haven't read it, but I know about it. It's called Snakes in Suits. That kind of captures the corporate psychopath mentality that's very, very prevalent in our world today. And so, that's a huge concern, and that just requires, people to be involved in keeping their eye on people. And
there's nothing in the founding document that you could write that solves that. I mean, you could put like obstacles in the way, like you said. Okay, we can't, term limits, and we can't. We got to be nonpartisan. Those are obstacles, but they're clever. They're clever.
And, honestly,
right?
Yeah, they are. They are. And honestly, like our own founding documents for this country, like I would argue that in many ways our founding fathers in their writings understood implicitly the sociopathic personality and tried to do the best they can to limit power, because that's really the essence of the Constitution, is limiting government power.
Absolutely.
Because they realized how abusive people become when they have that power. And so, I worked a lot on those bylaws. It was a shared event, but I did the lion's share of it. And I kept that at the forefront of my mind when I was writing it. But, it's really impossible to fully gauge it. And it's honestly my greatest worry that, let's, we win and everything's great for a bit. What happens later?
Absolutely.
What happens later?
I don't expect you to solve that, because this is, like we said, this is like a species issue. It's not a labor union issue, right? But I'm really impressed that is on your mind. Of that is a thing that I'm worried about. So, what's your path to victory?
So it's been difficult because the union in the district that it's supposed to be bargaining against, like they seem to have been kind of working together for years, and that's kind of what's happening now. Um, our emails get blocked; we can't get them through. I am barred as like the one of the few members
Wait,
of
I'm
our
sorry.
organization
Your emails can't get from who to who?
from our website trying to inform the bargaining unit saying, hey, this is what we're about. Won't get through
You need to get an
to the
IT
email
guy
service
to
systems.
VPN that stuff around. Sorry, I'm just trying to solve your
Yeah,
problems
no,
for
I
you.
mean, but I know, and that's stuff that we've been trying to work around,
Uh-huh.
but it's obvious that we're being deliberately blocked by potentially their IT people.
Sure.
You see, and it's funny because you think that alone would be a signal to the bargaining unit, like, hey, there's something wrong when the very people that you're supposed to be bargaining against to try to get more benefits and wages are actively helping the very union you're trying to support. Like, don't you see that there's some type of mismatch there? Like, why would district, the school district, be supporting their current union? Like, that doesn't make sense. That would be like a business supporting their union. Would a business want to support their union? Mm, only if
Yeah.
that union that they have is serving them in some way.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so, we've had a real hard time trying to get information out. We've had to canvas door to door. And we did a public service request, public information request to get the names of all the public servants who are involved with the school system. And there's been a lot of bad information. A lot of people who had never worked with the school system in any way, never even had a contract with them. We wasted a lot of time knocking on doors that were, not connected with this in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had to do that, which has, slowed things up. But then back to what I was saying, that I'm, as part of the contract as it stands, rival unions are not allowed um, to have any platform on school grounds at all. So I essentially have a gag order on me. I can't even talk to my coworkers about it on school grounds. And as the rest of us who are involved in this and who are officers as a part of our organization, the Miami-Dade Education Coalition. And so our method has been to try to have people come to meetings, knock on their doors, and we send flyers and things like that to their houses to get them to, know a little bit about our organization and, potentially sign a card for us. But the truth is that the most publicity we've got has been from the current union telling everybody about us and how not to go with us, and how
So
bad we are.
when you're able to actually get in front and communicate with someone, okay, I'm teacher X.
Yeah.
And you get in front of me. I've only heard that the union said I shouldn't talk to you. You finally get a chance to talk to me. Percentage wise, once you're able to talk to them, how interested do they seem to be?
Almost 100%.
Okay, I got an idea for you that I'm not going to say on the recording. So remind me after we're done. I think I
All right. Yeah. Almost 100%.
Yeah.
Problem is that will people even open the door? You see, they've been instructed by the union, don't even open the door.
Mm-hmm.
You see,
Absolutely.
the people that do are already open-minded enough, and they hear you out, and they usually sign a card. We have the problem of, a lot of people not being home, catching them home, but it's been a monumental task, monumental.
I'm writing down notes here.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah,
After.
yeah, don't, and especially don't forget to tell me what you need to tell me.
Yeah, that's the note I'm writing down, so I don't forget. I got two ideas now.
Yep. We need all the help we can get in that way because we're not allowed. I'm not even allowed to speak at the staff meeting saying, hey, just come talk to me, after school. It's up to other teachers to kind of spread the word, and they are spreading the word. But it's slow going. The other medium is obviously social media. When we did this 20 plus years ago, we didn't have that. And we were able to gain a lot of signatures. And 20 years ago, people were already paying for memberships, even though we were not the official bargaining unit yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not even doing that right now. And so social media has been a help and a hindrance. It's a help in the sense that people can actually ask us correct questions directly. It's a hindrance, and this has been a hard lesson for myself, especially because before I did this, I was not a huge social media user. But the other side of it is you have people that are working for the current union that are this troll phenomenon that has been quite a lesson in pathology for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that people could think this way. And so, that's been the hindrance on that side of it because, they're able to evoke fear and, and a lot of teachers, they're agreeable people. Some of them are, run a little neurotic about stuff because they have high caretaker needs. And when people who are caretakers, they're constantly scanning for threats. It's just in their personality
Yeah.
because if you're a caretaker, you have to protect people. So their brains are already wired to sense threats. And so when the current union is able to send out emails or have their trolls
There's a
online
threat.
to
There's a
them, like,
threat. There's a threat. Freak out.
exactly.
Freak out. There's a threat. There's a threat. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of teachers that activates things that are just kind of a part of their personality biologically, which is also the same thing that makes them great teachers, you
Mm-hmm.
see, because they want to protect their students and their caretakers. And so, pushing past that, that's another tall order. But we're chipping away. We're chipping away at it. We're getting the cards signed, and we're hoping that we'll be at our 30% soon enough.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you wanted to say?
Well, one of the common accusations that get levied at us is that we're anti-union, and it's funny because
Are you saying that we're
we're trying to.
suicidal?
It's like,
we want to hang her? Like, what do you? Huh? Yeah.
yeah, we're trying to be a union. That rhetoric comes from the fact that we have enlisted some support from other organizations that have helped other unions become local and break away from their national affiliates.
Yes, we are anti your union, so you're
Yes.
technically partially correct.
Yeah. And so that relationship has given the naysayers the excuse in their minds to say that we're anti-union. And it's a confirmation bias that exists because this has been what we're doing right now has been done in like 7 states about 40 different times. And so if it's really anti-union, why did it happen 40 times?
Right.
You see?
And it doesn't need to make sense, right? It just needs to elicit the fear response. Threat. There's a threat. Something's
Yeah,
attacking you.
yeah,
Worry, freak out, threat. Yeah, I mean that's what they're doing.
yeah. And so and by enlisting these organizations to help us, it increases our chances of being able to reach everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And already, I mean, the blocking of the emails alone are, we have people who are working in IT that are trying to figure out those things to get around it. We have the biggest help is the legal advice and the legal assistance because some of these things are legal issues. These are things that could never be done if it was just us teachers. It couldn't happen.
Right.
There's too many there's too many nuances, legal things that we wouldn't able to navigate. I mean, I'm sure if we had 15 years to do it, we could have all done it. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that we are pro union, and the reason why we did this is when that bill that was passed happened, we were afraid that if it was put up to ballot where it's just the current union versus no union, we were afraid that people would choose no union because they're that sick of the current union.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want that. That is a place we don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing that was a very real possibility, we said, geez, we need to try to resurrect this. And we did. I held on to all the cards that we had collected from 20 years ago. I held them that long.
Wow.
Unfortunately, most of the people are, retired. And they're long since gone, but we had a small pocket of people that were left that we decided to try to start the engine again and try one more time, and by receiving some assistance, it made it much more viable. And the way the law was written, it made it much more viable. And so here we are, and we're plugging away, and we're making progress, and we're excited, and we're looking like we're gonna have a shot here. And we just hope that our colleagues, don't let their fear responses rule over them.
Absolutely.
And we want to be able to communicate with them that, yeah, we're not the psychopaths that they think, or that they're being made to think that we are. But that's going to take, a cognitive lift on their own end. And that's going to take them, engaging and doing their homework, to really like split the hairs on what's happening here, to see for themselves, not let someone else define the narrative for them, and be critical thinkers. That's one of the things that we're always trying to teach our students. Be a critical thinker. And when you're a critical thinker, you listen to opposing arguments as though they may be correct, but then test it afterwards. And I'm confident that my colleagues are able to do that. And I want to give them that opportunity. And if they do that, the choice is clear, that we will be a better organization.
If we want to find out more information about you, whether it's a potential teacher or not, or we want to contact you, where do we go? Give us a plug.
It's educatemiami.org. That is our website. You can contact us through there. You can contact me at info@educatemiami.org. We have a Facebook group. I'm regularly posting videos there. You can follow me as the MDEC. It's what we call ourselves for short, the MDEC president on Facebook, Brent Urbanik. Um, and yeah, go ahead and look us up and look at what we're doing. And if there's any of your viewers that think they could, help in some way with advice or any other way, we need all the help we can get. There's this constant narrative that the current union throws at us, that these organizations are helping us, are funded by billionaires and all that. Well,
we wish.
Yeah. The amount of money that we have compared to the support by the national and state unions and their financial prowess, it's not even close.
Yeah.
It's not even close.
We wish we had a billionaire. That'd be great.
Yeah. Exactly. We wish, because it's not even close in comparison. So educatemiami.org. We're the Miami-Dade Education Coalition, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Ask us questions to clarify our positions on things. And we're hoping that we can set a national standard in teacher pay, benefits, working conditions, so that other unions and other union leaders can see that you don't need these national and state affiliates, and you'll serve your members better if you become nonpartisan. And we're hoping that we can inspire you guys to do that too.
Excellent. Well, this has been Dylan Moore with Irida TV, which you can find at irida.tv. And I've had Brent Urbanik, which you can find at educatemiami.org. I got that right?
That's right.
Excellent. And we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.